Hello, I'm Geoff Kersey, and in this subject I've chosen a scene from a little village in Sicily called Taormina. I was particularly attracted to the lovely warm colours on the stucco and the purple reflections. I've used the tracing provided to get my drawing in place, and I've put some masking fluid on some of the areas where I know I'm going to need white paper later on. I'm going to start by mixing some colours for the sky. Just a wash of ultramarine blue, fairly thin at first. But before I apply that to the sky area, I'm just taking a 1-inch flat brush, loading it up with water, and I'm just going to wet this background area where we glimpse the sky between the rooftops and the wall of this building on the right. Making sure that it's thoroughly wet right down to where I've applied the masking fluid. Don't want any dry passages. It's a really good idea to look at it sideways on if you can, to look at the shine of the water on the paper and make sure you haven't missed any bits. And then still with the number 10 brush, I'm just going to lay some horizontal strokes across the top to suggest the sky with the mixture of ultramarine blue. And as I come down, I'm adding more water so it thins out and gets paler as we come behind the buildings. And I'm going to leave that to dry. Well, now that the background's dry, the next stage is to put a horizontal line across to suggest a distant view of the sea. Quite understated, quite pale. I'm actually using the same colour again as I used in the sky, and it's about the same strength. You have got to make sure with this line that it is totally horizontal. With the number 10 brush, running that straight across. Continue with these horizontal streaks right behind the building. This is where you're really glad of the masking fluid, because you can still preserve the shape of the towers and the chimneys, etc., without having to paint round them. It doesn't affect the nice, even, horizontal line. And we can just fade that out with a bit of water so we don't get a hard line later on down that left-hand edge. And then, while that's still damp, I've cleaned the number 10 brush, made sure it's moist but not wet through. I find a good tip for this is to clean the brush and then run it between your fingers, which gets rid of most of the water, but not all of it. And I'm just going to use that to try and blur that edge at the top. That's fine, so we just need to leave that to dry now. You can see now that that horizontal line in the distance is quite faint and quite soft, nothing too strong. It just represents a distant glimpse of where the sea meets the sky. I'm now going to mix some colours for the distant trees behind the building. So I'm taking a number 6 brush and getting some more ultramarine blue, not too strong, and I'm adding a touch of alizarin crimson to it. I want a light purple colour to start the trees off, because the further away they are, the bluer they look. Then I'm going to mix a bluey green with some viridian and cobalt blue. Now, there's quite a few colours to this stage, and so that they blend and mix with each other on the paper, I need to have them all mixed and ready. So it's a little bit of mixing time before we actually start painting. I now want a brighter green, so I'm going to take some Aureolin. This again is a little bit thicker now. Each colour is a little bit stronger than the one that went before it. And I'm adding to the Aureolin some cobalt blue. And the final colour I want is a rich dark green, and that's with viridian, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Plenty of burnt sienna or it looks too emerald, far too bright. Okay, so that's all the colours mixed for this stage. I'm making sure the brush is really clean, and then I'm starting with the slightly purpley blue, the ultramarine and alizarin crimson. To get a little bit of texture into this, to make it look like the edge of a tree, I'm holding the brush with my thumb at one side of the handle and 4 fingers at the other, so that I'm able to put the side of the brush to the paper rather than the point. And right behind this little tower here, I'm starting with that shape for a tree. And you can see how using the brush on its side like this enables me to get that broken shape that suggests foliage. Bit of water, thin it slightly. Bringing it over there. Again, you need a light touch. Not just a case of how to hold the brush. If your brush is full of paint ready to just flood off the end of it, it's very difficult to get this effect. Your brush needs to be not too wet. And now, as I'm coming down into this area behind the trees, I'm adding a little touch of the brighter green into it. Very important to work quite rapidly so that when you're putting one colour in, the previous one is still wet. Then that bluey green, a touch of that bluey green, that's the mixture of viridian and cobalt blue. A little touch of that into this area here. I'm going to add a touch of water to keep it flowing. A bit more of the bright green. Gradually working down to the left of these buildings here. A bit more of the bluey green before I finally introduce this rich dark green. Now some of this goes in front of the building, but that will have to come later on because the masking fluid's still in place. A bit more here. And while that's still damp, I'm just going to get on the tip of this number 6 brush a little touch of lemon yellow and add a few suggestions of leaves into this area here. This is neat lemon yellow, straight out of the tube, and it just adds a bit of bright green against that dark there. And we'll leave that to dry. Now that those background trees have dried, I'm just going to remove the masking fluid from the central building. Try when you do this not to disturb it on this right-hand building here. You still need that in place. Get rid of it from the little towers. And you can see how that's given us a nice clean shape to get this colour of the stucco onto the walls. So I'm going to take the number 6 brush again. I would get a mixture of raw sienna and permanent rose. Not too thin and not too strong, a sort of medium wash. It's got to have enough strength to have a glow, but not too overpowering. And that permanent rose turns the raw sienna into this yellowy pink colour. Okay, so I'm going to start painting the little chimney here. Not too much paint on the brush. The little roofs of the towers and the roof of the building itself I'm leaving for the time being. Okay, you need a brush with a good point so you can get into these corners without losing shape. This colour provides us a nice contrast with the purples and greens behind it as well. And then I'm carrying on onto the building itself. To speed it up a bit, I'm using a bit bigger brush now. I've gone to the number 10 and I'm coating the whole of this building now in this colour, but I'm carefully painting around the little window shapes. Again, this is where your brushing needs to be in good condition so you can use the point to get round these shapes. I'm making it a little bit warm and I'm adding a touch more raw sienna to it. Bringing it in right under the roof. Again, taking care to leave the little rectangles of white paper that will represent the windows later on. Bring that colour onto this little building here as well. Don't have to worry too much about this far right-hand edge of this building because that can come right up against the masking fluid that's in place there. Again, leaving the roof for the time being as white paper. And now I've added a bit of water to the colour to thin it, and I'm bringing it down into an area that eventually will be covered up by more greenery. More colour into there. And I'm adding a bit of water down at this bottom end here, just to thin it out so that I haven't got too strong a colour behind the greens later on. And that needs a few moments to dry. So now that the background colour's dried, I've mixed some ultramarine blue and crimson. Same colour I used on that distant tree behind the towers. And this is going to be the shadow colour. So I've gone back to the number 6 brush and we'll start with these towers here. Again, I'm going to still, even with the shadow colour, I'm still going to try and leave the little shapes that represent windows, that little diamond shape right at the top there. And the light's coming from the left, so I've got to be consistent with that and put all my shadows on the right. The same on the next tower. Again, leaving that little diamond shape out for the little window there. Same applies to the chimney. The front edge of it catches the light, but the side of it is in shadow. So now I'm coming to the main building and just putting shadow under that eave. This roof has got quite a big overhang, so I'm going to make this shadow quite a deep mark. And then this edge of the building is totally in shadow. There's a touch of shadow under the surround for these windows. Sticking with this same mixture of ultramarine blue and crimson alizarin. Remember, the light's coming from the left, so it gives us almost like a back to front L shape down the right hand side and underneath. And then this building here has some shadow under the eave. You can see how shadow starts to make them look solid and three-dimensional. And the shadow under here, I'm going to fade out where it gets covered by the plants and leaves and things in this right-hand corner. Okay, we'll leave that to dry.